Ladies and gentlemen, welcome wrestling fans worldwide to Knoxville and the Great Smoky Mountains for the Ron Fuller, Tennessee Studcast.
6 feet 9 inches tall, 265 pounds.
This historic podcast from one of the most respected and successful wrestlers and promoters will follow the footsteps of the largest and oldest wrestling family on the planet.
Listen to what I'm saying. That's right. Bring that camera in here a little bit closer.
Through 93 years and 4 generations.
The stud has arrived.
Old school or new fan, this unique broadcast will educate and captivate as Ron details decades of professional wrestling's growth with truly unforgettable stories.
I want those people out there at home to hear the stud.
Sit back and enjoy the ride with the Tennessee Stud.
The Tennessee Stud. You will learn that name. You will remember it.
And now,
the stud is here.
Hey, everybody, welcome in. Let's get it on. It's David Summers hosting another Studcast with the Tennessee Stud, Ron Fuller. Here comes the story of wrestling in America as told by the Stud, whose family started the profession over 100 years ago. So now, let's step back into the ring and back into time. Let's get wall to wall and treetop tall with the Tennessee Stud, Ron Fuller. Hey, Ron, I'm hearing a song nowadays, and I think about you and me. Matter of fact, I think about you and me singing the song together. It's called Shotgun Rider. Miley Cyrus and Beyonce sing it together. So I really, you know what, folks? I think by now Ron is probably getting in his car, driving to Southeast Alabama, 8 hours to whip my and then drive straight back home.
I don't know, man. It might work.
What's going on in your world, Ron?
Oh, nothing, man. Just, kind of enjoying a nice day. Pretty day today here. 83 degrees. And, just happy to be alive.
That's awesome, but you probably won't get my opening statement on this podcast out of your mind for a little while. And I hope you get better from it. All right, I tell you what, y'all. We start off with congratulations to Ron. And this Studcast is number 360. You are only 4 Studcasts away from beginning your 7th year doing these historic podcasts. During that time, Ron, you have established yourself as a one-of-a-kind professional wrestling historian, no doubt. One-of-a-kind meaning a wrestler, a booker, you're a promoter, you're an owner, you're a member of the oldest and largest wrestling family on the planet. That's a lot of words, but every word is true, and that's awesome. Congratulations.
Well, thanks, Dave. I appreciate it, but it's the listeners out there, man, around the world that are really responsible for this, and for certainly 360 episodes at this point. I started doing these in 2017, and when I started, I really planned on doing, I might do 8 or 10 of these. And then suddenly, overnight, they became popular. I didn't realize that, hey, this might be good and fans may like this. But it kind of blew up since then.
You know what? I take a lot of pride in saying that you and I were sitting on my back porch here looking out into the woods. When you first talked about, and it may not have been the first time you talked about a podcast, but you told me about it, and I thought, wow, okay, that'll be interesting. I had no idea, like you said, maybe 10 or so. I had no idea how far you would go with these. So I'm not surprised you would say they were only popular when the wrestling world says they are an absolute necessity. So after almost 7 years, fans everywhere cannot wait until Wednesdays. I know that's me. I learn a lot from these podcasts. When you release another one, it's like, boom, here it comes. All right, so what is truly amazing about these is the fact that you have missed only 4 Studcasts in 364 weeks since you started these almost 7 years ago. I have to say that is almost perfect attendance for 7 years.
Well, I guess it's a pretty good record. I'd have to say that. And obviously, I enjoy doing these because of their success. I have some special surprises, as a matter of fact, Dave, coming up in the future. We're going to be talking about over the next couple of months, and that's going to make these even better and more historical than ever.
You know, they say when you love what you're doing, you will never work a day in your life. And that's sort of how I am imagining your life has been, for your love of wrestling and then your love of doing what you're doing now, accounting for all of these years. I can't wait to hear more about all of this. And with that in mind, what special surprises do you have in mind for us today?
We're going to be riding, man, in Southeastern Knoxville first. We're going to have a look at the card there, which was on the Thursday night, July the 24th, 1980 in Chilhowie Park. Good place to start, I guess, right?
Absolutely. All right, so are you going to tell us who the two very famous wrestlers were that were going to buy out the Georgia promoters in the future? I asked about that last week, and you said, nope, Dave. Wait until next week. That's this week.
Yeah, I kind of enjoy doing that to you.
I know.
And you got an excellent memory, Dave, about some things, especially when I make you wait until next week to find out something. You usually remind me.
I wrote that down.
So yes, I'm going to tell everybody about the future owners of the Southeastern Knoxville territory in this one. And I think this is the perfect hidden history lesson, because many of the fans listening today will still, to this day, 44 years later, not be aware of who these two guys were, man. Pretty crazy that they were under the radar for all these years.
Wow, I think you're right, though. The perfect hidden history lesson. And don't forget that controversial NWA title change in the Georgia territory. You said we were going to talk about that on this Studcast also.
Well, you were on it today, Dave. I tell you, man.
Another thing I wrote down.
Well, I'm going to cover that, and then we're going to head south again. We're going to be going, obviously, into Alabama and the Florida Panhandle for the next big card in the three major cities there, the third week of July, 1980. And every city we ran in during this time period was selling out, and it was going to happen again in this Studcast. But we're going to discuss the card, the TV show that promoted it, the results of the matches on that card, and the attendances. And this time, not just in the three major cities, but we're going to talk about the attendances in all of the cities that ran in the Florida Panhandle, including the two cities in Florida, actually. So then hopefully we'll have time maybe for another learning tree question, too.
I got to tell you, that's why I love riding shotgun with you and just kind of watching the trail as it goes by to see what's going to pop up next. You have definitely loaded this Studcast again, and I hope we can get into that very special learning tree question. I'm saying for the end of this Studcast as well. I'm saving that for the end of the show. All right, so maybe we can get it all in on this show today. So tell us how we get it started. What's first?
Well, the Southeastern Knoxville territory in the Chilhowie Park Amphitheater. Let's start right there. And I have to say, this is an excellent card that they had for this week. The only thing that I have to tell everyone about the card is what came from the newspaper ad, though. I know nothing else other than what I saw in a newspaper ad that's been sent to me by Mr. Ed Harrison, good friend of mine that sends me all these so that I can go back and see the things that I would have no way to find otherwise. And this is the ad that showed up the day of this event. And the ad told about the top three events only, and then said that after they discussed the top three events, that there were just three other matches on the card. So let's start, since we only don't know anything about the first three, with the fourth match of this card. And in that fourth match was Tony Atlas and Kevin Sullivan against Abdullah the Butcher and Crazy Mark Lewin. I mean, wow. That had to be a wild match. Anything with Abdullah the Butcher in it, man, was going to be bloody, at least, I can tell you that.
No kidding.
I know, because I had some matches with Abdullah. And actually, I ran into him in this past week over in Charlotte in the deal I went to over there.
Wow.
Wow. Abby had been sick, and I hadn't seen him in a long time, and I happened to be walking through there just looking around to see who else was there, and wow, he went nuts. He started crying, man. I was like, Abby, come on, man.
Wow.
You know, no need for that. So it was really nice to see Abby. But wow, what an animal he was in the ring.
A
and
legend.
So was Mark
Yeah.
Lewin.
Wow. Yeah.
So then the next match was between two wrestlers, Mr. Wrestling 2 and one of the Assassins. And this was the fourth week in a row that these two guys have been against each other. This was the first time, I think, as a single. They had been 2 weeks in tag matches before this. And then on this day, there was going to be a mask versus mask match. And now in the fourth week, we've had the mask versus match last week. We got the lumberjack with them this time. And wrestlers going to be surrounding the ring, throw them back in, whoever has to run or get away. And I can't really explain what this was all about. I don't know how they got the mask versus mask, then came back with the lumberjack match. And I don't know that they even took their mask off. This was kind of what was going on in Knoxville. It was hard for fans to really understand, and hard for me to understand what was going on, actually. But the main event for this one was an NWA World Championship match. Harley Race was in town, Knoxville, to face Tommy Rich.
Wow.
Tommy Rich was a real star back at this time frame. He was just reaching his prime. Special referee for this match, Luthez. So obviously this should have been a great match. I didn't see it because I was wrestling, and obviously down the southeastern Gulf Coast, actually wrestling an event in Panama City, Florida, the same night that this occurred in Knoxville. So this is a good place, I guess, to discuss this, the controversial match that you mentioned earlier in the Georgia territory. I talked about it last week, and you brought it up again. So in Harley's run as the world champion, he began in the latter part of his run, and this is where we are at this point in 1980. He began to drop the belt to some of the challengers in what was called by a lot of the promoters and owners and members of the NWA short reigns, let's call it. It happened with Dusty Rhodes in Florida. He did it with Giant Baba in Japan, and he did it with Tommy Rich in Georgia. And the way it worked was Harley would lose the belt on his first night in the territory. He'd come in for, say, a week, and he would lose the belt first night in the territory, and then on the last night, the wrestler that he lost it to, he would beat and win the belt back.
Wow. What was that like, convincing, the baddest man on God's green earth to agree to do that? Was that a big deal, convincing Harley Race?
Well, Harley was a businessman, and he loved being the champion, and and he didn't want to, I'm sure, tell people no, especially guys that were powerful and in charge of things.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he didn't like it. And I'm not sure if this was the week it happened in Georgia, but it could have been. This might be the week that we talk about in this championship match here.
Wow.
And I personally was opposed to having a world champion do that kind of thing. And I'm pretty sure Harley was too. And I thought it belittled him to be beat often. But it still happened, and a lot of other territories owners around the world agreed with me.
You're exactly right. You're thinking exactly the way I was. This was a proud champion, and you're asking him to turn the belt over, take a loss, but he probably at least had in his mind, okay, I'm going to get the belt back, and that's going to be good for this territory. That's really fascinating stuff and an unexpected hidden history lesson for sure. All right, so what happened in that NWA title match in Knoxville?
Like I said, I wasn't there, but I assume if Tommy had won the belt, let's say on Monday, having wrestled in that Georgia territory when I first started, that was always the night for Augusta, Georgia. He would have probably won the belt in Augusta, Georgia on a Monday night, and he would have been introduced in Knoxville as the world champion. Mm-hmm. He would have taken with the 10 pounds of gold, he would have worn it to the ring. And so on Thursday in Knoxville, he probably won that match. Or it may have been a disqualification, but he kept that belt because I'm sure that they were looking to put the belt back on Harley in the Omni, which was their big shot there in the Georgia territory, in Atlanta itself. And that was usually on a Friday or Saturday night. And that would have been the last night of that particular week. So I have a feeling that's how it went down anyway.
Yeah, you want to do that in front of a big crowd for the baddest man. So, and speaking of which, how about attendance for that night? How did you guys do? How'd that go?
Well, they did about 3,000. And that was a big night for them compared to what it had been, but it was less than half of the crowd. As an example, in the Coliseum for my world title shot with Harley in April of 1977. That was the event. We did about 7,000 people and broke the all-time record in that building for a sports event, and it's still the record for a sports event. But 3,000. That was something for them to be pretty happy about, because their crowds, they had left the Coliseum already, and now they were out there in the park permanently. And so, I'm sure they were pleased with that.
All right, that's cool. And you just talk about 3,000 in that arena, but it honestly just doesn't compare to what you were doing down south in Southeastern Gulf Coast territory. But I'll tell you what, this is a great start for this Studcast. So are you ready to let us know who the two wrestlers were that bought Southeastern Knoxville after the Georgia promoters left?
Yeah, and this is going to be a little test for you, Dave. See if you can guess, okay?
All right.
One of these guys was almost as tall as I was. He outweighed me by about 50 pounds, and the other, in 1980, was soon going to be an NWA world champion.
All right. I remember last Studcast you said they were well known in the mid-Atlantic territory of Jim Crockett Sr. I know Ric Flair spent a lot of time in that territory, became world champion like after 1980. So I guess he's one of them, but I have no idea who the bigger one might be, because Ric Flair was certainly not that tall.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, not nearly as tall as the other one was Blackjack Mulligan, man. Who was the father of two wrestlers, Barry and Kendall Windam. Barry I wrestled partners with in Japan in 1983 for 3 weeks every night, Barry and I. And Mulligan was also the father-in-law of Mike Rotundo, and he was the maternal grandfather of Bo Dallas and Bray Wyatt. Guys that are bigger names got to be bigger names recently. So, crazy that those two guys would become partners. I bet they had wrestled each other, no telling how many times before they became partners in that territory.
Wow. Of course, the names Barry Windam and Mike Rotundo definitely stand out. And the other guys I certainly recognize. But I would have never, until maybe I heard this a while back, I would have never put them together with Blackjack Mulligan being a father and then a father-in-law to any of those recognizable names. I've definitely heard of him. But so how about the partners with Ric Flair in the Knoxville territory after the Georgia promoters failed there? So when did all that go down?
Well, I think I'm going to wait a little longer, man, to tell that story, Dave. We got a lot coming up here, man. But I got to say, it's going to be an interesting one. I think we'll probably talk about that next week.
I should have known. These Studcasts have really been tremendous based upon what was happening in Tennessee during this time frame. All right, can you tell us what the card was? Let's go to Southeastern Gulf Coast in the third week of July of 1980. Set that up for us.
Well, this week we were going to be in the main arena in Mobile. I always loved that, especially since we were consistently selling out that little I call it, about 5,800 it would hold in the expo hall. But we're going to be in the main arena in Mobile, And this one was not going to be one of those 7-match cards like we've been having the last 2 weeks, but it was going to be a 6-match card. But I think this one was an even stronger card than the 7-match cards. And the opening match was Roy Lee Welch versus the Avenger. The second match was a totally new combination. Charlie Cook was facing Randy Rose. In the next 3-man match that we had been having just about every week, the 3 guys in this one was Tony Charles, Sweet Brown Sugar, and Norvell Austin. And obviously it was all against all in those type of matches. And the winner of that match was going to get a shot, the United States Junior Heavyweight Champion. And then for the United States Junior Heavyweight Championship, the next match, the present champion, Jerry Stubs, was wrestling the favorite of the Gulf Coast down there, local boy, born and raised Pensacola, Ricky Gibson. In a Southeastern Tag Championship match, second in a row. This one was another of those losing team has to split up match. So we'd had it last week. This is the second time. This is a different team that Rob and I were wrestling this time. This time, Big C demanded that we do it again, and because he had him a bigger partner this time, and I'm sure he thought he was going to be able to win and split me and Rob up, and his partner was going to be Plowboy Frazier.
Yeah.
So the main event was was a first for Southeastern Wrestling. The last bull rope match the week before ended up with Bob Armstrong and Joe Leduc taking Ron Bass's bull rope to their dressing room. So this time it's going to be 4 men in the ring, 2 bull ropes, Bob Armstrong attached to Mongolian Stomper, Joe Leduc attached to Ron Bass, and the Big C is going to be standing out there on the floor managing, hopefully. Hopefully he decides not to get too much involved.
Wow, I agree with you on that. That card was a really, really great one, especially with the double bull rope match. It was definitely going to be something to see. So how about the TV show? How did the TV show, the third one in the rating month of July, which was really big, how did the TV show open up?
Well, this one opened up with Charlie Pratt running down the card for the entire show. And he started talking about a tag match with a new team, the Big C and Plowboy Frazier going to be on the show. He talked about the hometown favorite across the territory, Ricky Gibson, was going to be in action. It was going to be a great personality profile about Southeastern's first ever bull rope match. Charlie Cook was going to make a rare TV appearance. And then the last match on the show, because it was rating period, was another championship match. This time is going to be Bob Armstrong defending his TV trophy against Ron Bass. So, that sounds like another great TV during the July rating period. We were doing well. We had we'd been having record months in our arenas. The TV station, the ratings were really good, and so we were really looking forward to finishing out the month and really setting some records, especially maybe in the rating game, which we were really poised to do that because it was so important to business. So Rob and I, with our belts, we were at the set with Charlie. We had Big C and Plowboy. They went to the ring, followed by their valet, Floyd. I guess it's Plowboy's valet. It wasn't Big C's valet. And so they entered the ring to a roar of boos, obviously, from the TV audience. And these two wrestlers had a lot of heat. Plowboy got a lot of heat since he'd been there. Big C, obviously. And like everybody in the heel crew that was there during that time frame, probably one of the only reasons all the buildings were full is because the heels had so much heat. So Robert, Charlie, and I, we got into a discussion right off the bat about why our upcoming tag championship match with the new tag team in the ring was again going to be one of those losing teams have to split forever. We weren't aware that we were going to have to do that again. So Charlie informed us that Don Curtis, the Southeastern commissioner had told him that it was the Big C's idea, that he not only asked for this match, but he demanded it after last week's match where Randy Rose and Big C was wrestling us, losing team split, and they lost, and so they weren't going to be together again. And I guess he felt like having that big boy on his team was going to make him get himself a victory here and split me and Rob up as a team. So Rob and I said, Big C had obviously felt the giant plowboy was going to get the job done this coming week, and this week he was going to be able to split us up forever. And either that or Big C was going to run out of tag partners, and they had to become just a mouth of a manager, man. He wasn't going to be in tag matches in it. He was quickly running out of partners. So on the ring apron over there, while all this is going on, in fact, while the entire match was going on, Big C was focused on my brother and I. And Plowboy was kind of single-handedly, literally crushing the opponents that was in the ring with. So Big C kept screaming at Rob and I, that this is going to be the end of the Fuller Brothers tag team forever, and he was waving goodbye, and he was giving us a rough time over there on the apron of the ring. So all three of us, including Charlie, noticed that everybody in the studio was paying more attention to the Big C than anything else that was going on. So Charlie was still upset with him from last week, and he said the Big C was absolutely. He said, guys, I hate to say it, but the Big C is an absolutely disgusting human being. he said, I probably shouldn't say that, but he says, I hope y'all kick his butt again this week. So, and then Big C, I don't know if Big C probably couldn't hear what was being said. So about that time, Plowboy, he piled both opponents, put one guy on top of the other. Then he ran to the ropes and came back, and he splashed on top of both of them. That 400-pound plus body, I mean, he was a big boy. And Big C never got in the ring till the bell rang. Plowboy had done it all. And then he dripped in there and raised Plowboy's hand like he had done it. He'd done the job himself, basically. So after the commercial break, Rob and I stayed at the set with Charlie for the first interview of the show. And when we finished, we left, and Big C and Plowboy headed for the set. But here it went again. Charlie got up, and he left the set before they got there. So Big C and Plowboy had to do their own thing.
Wow. Okay. I don't know if you realized that yesterday was Charlie's birthday. Did you call him?
Oh, I sent him something. I sure did. I sent him a nice message.
Matter of fact, I think he told me he had heard from you. All right. So anyway, it sounds like Charlie for the second time was through with Big C again. So hey, I tell you what, this is a good place to take a break. Let's do it right now. And when we come back, we're going to find out who was in the second segment of that TV show. These are some of the best wrestling TV shows I've ever seen in my life, and I saw a lot of them, especially down in the state of Florida and some in Georgia. But it's coming up. This Studcast will continue in a moment right here. Hey, Studcast fans, Ron's Super Studcast are as hot as the summer, and they're on fire. There are 43 of these tremendous 3-hour shows on his website at tnstud.com. Click Super Studcast. Each one only $2.99. They feature some of the most famous wrestlers in history, like Mick Foley, Bob Armstrong, Kevin Sullivan, Jim Cornette, Terry Funk, Austin Idol, and many more. Many with fantastic stories and Ron's memories of them, like Andre the Giant and Ron Wright. Each of these is a classic history lesson. You will not be able to stop with just one. Find out the history you've been missing. tnstud.com. Super Studcast. Get one today. All right, Studcast fans, welcome back in another Studcast with the Tennessee Stud, Ron Fuller. This one is episode number 360. It's called Two Bull Ropes, Bob, Bass, Leduc, Stomper. Let's get back to it. So we're now into the TV show for the third week in July of 1980. All right, Stud, so you're going to take us to the second segment on the TV show. Set it up for us.
Okay, so obviously we got another very hot heel, man. It's going to be in this one. He's the United States Junior Heavyweight Champion, Jerry Stubs. Owner of the belt at this point for 4 weeks. Been undefeated for 4 weeks. He joined Charlie Platt at the set to watch a video of his last victory over Norvell Austin the week before. Plus make some comments about his next opponent who was going to be wrestling after he got finished with Charlie at the set, who was going to be Ricky Gibson. So Charlie was ready to play the video of the title match between Stubs and Norvell Austin from the week before, and Stubs all of a sudden refused to watch it. He said he wouldn't even have come out to the set if he had been told that he was going to be watching any video. And it's a small wonder he had that idea, because the video was going to clearly show him getting another controversial win. Same as he had done with a lot of these guys that he had been wrestling since he'd won the belt, with getting something from his wrestling boot and knocking guys out with it. And he did that in this match with Norvell. Obviously, he didn't want to sit there and watch him do that, pretty obviously. He's cheating big time. And so Charlie asked him, well, okay, would you like to stay and at least watch your next opponent here, Ricky Gibson, maybe make some comments? So Stubs fired back at Charlie, and he accused him of trying to set me up. He said, you try to set me up here, inviting me out here, not telling me I was going to watch this video. And he says, no, I'm not going to stay here now. And he says, I'm going back to the dressing room. But he did have one comment for Ricky Gibson. He said, before I go, though, he says, you can tell Ricky Gibson that he's got no better chance than any of the other three junior heavyweight contenders in this area to ever beat me. And so he said the first time in this interview, he referred to himself as Mr. Perfect, Jerry Stubs. So he kind of started a new name for himself in this one. Studio audience, they let him know with a roar how they felt about his new name. And they'd been supporting him for years. And now he had turned into being a no-good son of a gun. So he returned the favor. To the studio audience, he held his belt over his head as he walked to the dressing room, strutted actually to the dressing room with his belt over his head.
So you're saying the studio audience was really supporting him with his name, Mr. Perfect?
Yeah, right. They let him know what they thought about it.
All right, so it sounds like he was really enjoying himself and enjoying being a heel. All right, so after this opening to the second segment, my guess is that Ricky Gibson was the next wrestler about to hit the ring.
Yeah, and he was also very happy, man, to be finally getting a shot at the champion, Jerry Stubs. He had been there for about 3 weeks or a month, and so he had proved it quickly, showing some great wrestling skills in this match. Ricky was a tremendous wrestler. Wow, and so was his brother, Robert. And then at the end of the match, he drop-kicked his opponent from the top rope, which reminded me of Jimmy Golden, which Jimmy was no longer competing at this point. And wow. And he hit the guy so good with the drop kick that he shot the guy out of the ring and out on the concrete. He had to go out and get him and throw him back into the ring to cover him. So it was another one of those baby faces along with Norvell Austin that was really getting over. Ricky was a great star. Norvell was a new baby face. We had a couple of guys on these underneath cards. There was another reason we were selling out these buildings.
Oh, no doubt. All right, how about the personality profile? It was definitely becoming one of the high spots on every TV show.
Well, this one had Bob Armstrong and Joe Leduc with Charlie Platt at the profile set. And gosh, they got a wild welcome from the fans, naturally. And they were carrying with them, when they went to the set, Ron Bass's bull rope that they had ended up with after the last week, in which Bass and them, Bass left the ring without it. Stomper was involved. It was a wild melee. We'll talk about that match in just a second. Charlie kind of set the tone for what was going to be called the historic first ever double bull rope match in Southeastern history. That's what it was. We'd rarely ever had a bull rope match because Southeastern in Knoxville didn't have Ron Bass in it. So this was kind of rare for us to have one bull rope match. We had just finished one bull rope match last week. Now we're going to have two bull ropes.
Wow.
So
okay.
Charlie welcomed him. He started the profile, and he started it with this video, a shocking video, really, man. It kind of showed the reason that we're going to have a double bull rope match. And when the video opened up, both Leduc and Bass, they were already bloody at this point. It didn't take long in these bull rope matches. You had that bell, and you started banging guys in the head with that bell. It didn't take long to end up pretty bloody. And Leduc, at this point in the video, was dragging Bass around the ring, touching the turnbuckles. You had to drag the guy in order to win the match around and touch all four turnbuckles twice around the ring. And so he was about at the fourth rope, fourth post, and you had to have 8 to win the match. And so at this point, Big C sneaked up in the ring behind the referee's back. He loaded his glove. Also, it was behind Leduc's back as well. He nailed the ref. Then he nailed Leduc back of the head with his glove. And then he took the leather strap that connected your hand to the bull rope off of Leduc's hand. And about that time, Bass was finally able to get to his feet. And he took the strap off of his own hand. And together, they drug Joe Leduc over to a ring post and put the bull rope around his throat, and they hung him on one of the ring posts.
Wow.
It was horrible. It was horrible. So Bob Armstrong's back there watching it. Well, he had to go to help him. I mean, I don't know, they might have killed him, and so he came to the rescue, and the referee was kind of getting up at this point. He started ringing the bell, stopped the match. So Bob threw Big C over the top rope. He got rid of him. Then he stopped Bass. He untied Leduc from the rope, and then him and Leduc took the rope and put it around Bass's throat, and they hung Bass in the corner. And that rolled, this video came from a Mobile crowd, and they'd never seen anything like that. So they were just, that crowd was going absolutely crazy. Well, that brought the Stomper to the ring. And he attacked Joe, and Joe and Bass had their back. Joe and Bob had their backs turned, and Bass, they were finishing tying Bass up to the rope. And along came Stomper. Nailed them in the back, and all three of them, finally, Bass got away. He got Bass away from the ring post. He rolled him out on the floor where Big C was. All three of those guys got outside. The police got around them, and they fought their way. Mobile. They had to fight their way back to the dressing room. And what they did not do, though, was to get Ron Bass's bull rope. That's why they ended up coming there to start this profile off with the bull rope with it. So fans in the studio, they were going crazy watching this. They hadn't seen this match. And Charlie then announced that earlier in the day, the Big C, Stomper, and Ron Bass had recorded some comments and about this upcoming double bull rope match. And he told the director to run the video that had been shot earlier in the day. And Big C, as usual, began the interview. This time, he started off with a warning to the fans about how dangerous this double bull rope match was going to be. And he guaranteed that either Armstrong or Leduc was going to get hurt badly, and maybe both of them. And then Ron Bass, he snatched the microphone away from Big C. And he was even more angry than Big C, and he said, he said, nobody's ever stolen my bull rope from me, right? And he said, but, I was really mad about it, he goes, but then I went and got myself a new one, a new bull rope. And he said, this one's much more dangerous than my old bull rope because I'm kind of glad they stole my bull rope. And so he said Stomper had been standing behind him at this point. He had nothing to say. He never talked anyway. But he was holding this new bull rope because he was standing behind both Big C and Bass. People hadn't seen this new rope. So Bass asked Stomper to give me that bull rope. And it was pretty much the same bull rope except for the size of the bell on it. The new bull rope, the bell on the new bull rope was at least twice as big as the bell on the bull rope that Bob and Joe had sitting over there on the set. So Bass finished the interview. He held up the huge bell up to the camera in front of him, and the crowd instantly reacted. They saw that bell. They were like, oh, my. They were all screaming like, gee, my knee, that'll kill somebody. So Bass continued. He told me he wanted to talk to Joe at this point, I guess. Mm-hmm. Said, Joe Leduc, he said, I'm sure you remember those 2 months that you were out of action with a concussion because I hit you with that little bell that you got on the rope, that on my bull rope, and that you guys now have it. And he goes, you and I are going to be attached to this one, the new one, right? And he says, I'm going to hit you so hard with this one, Joe Leduc, I guarantee it's going to end your career. So the Stomper got to do something, man. He always had to be involved in one way or another. So he made his own statement. He just shoved Big C out of the way, and he jumped right up next to Bass, and he put his hand around his wrist like he used to do, and he opened his hand real wide like a claw. And then he looked right straight into the camera, and he grunted, one of those deals like that. And that was the end of their little interview.
Yeah, that would have been enough. Just that's enough to change my mind about all of it. So, I mean, this is really becoming a very serious event. So how did the profile end?
Well, Bob Armstrong went back to the set again, and Bob Armstrong agreed with what had just been said, that this was probably going to be, he said, this is going to be, I think, the most dangerous match I've ever had. He admitted that up front, and he held up the smaller bull rope bell, and he warned the Stomper that he intended to ring his bell with this little bell until they had to carry him out. He said, that's what I'm going to do. And so Joe Leduc kind of ended the profile. And he said, when this is over, he said he was going to tie that new bull rope that Bass showed him around Bass's neck. And he says, I'm going to put that huge bell right under his throat. And he said, I'm going to make him my dog, and I'm going to lead him around on his hands and knees for the rest of his life. So the studio crowd, they had already popped several times, but that was the biggest pop, man. And the talk was over at that point, though, and Southeastern and these four wrestlers, they were about to make history.
Wow. So these personality profiles have really become the highlight of many of the last TV shows. To me, it was one of the best segments on the TV show. All right, so what was next?
Well, Charlie Cook was going to be in a very rare TV match. He was wrestling Randy Rose the following week. Randy Rose was at the set with Charlie, and Rose had a lot to say while Charlie Cook was doing his talking in the ring. And Charlie was a great wrestler, and he never got as much acclaim as he should have. So Rose reminded Charlie, man, of his tag team championship run a short time ago with Dr. Bill Irwin, which had been about 2 months earlier. Him and Bill Irwin had been tag champions for quite a while. And he wanted to know whose idea was it this losing team splits up match last week. That's why I can't wrestle with Big C and win the championship because of that. But he says, I'm sure that Big C and Plowboy are going to be able to get the job done this week. And they're going to take the tag belts from the Fuller Punks. And then he continued saying, if they didn't, he said, Big C's promised me that he's got big plans for me in the near future. And he says, I'm going to once again be one of the tag champions. So Charlie Cook about that time finished off his opponent. And Rose kind of went back to the dressing room with his big plans that Big C had for him.
Big plans. All right. How did the TV show end after all of this?
Well, with the title match for that beautiful TV trophy, Bob Armstrong, the champion, is going to be facing Ron Bass. The studio, gosh, as soon as they heard that announced at the beginning of the show, that's going to be the last match. They were ready for this one, that's for sure. And so Big C brought Bass to the ring to a roaring reception of boos, I guess you'd say. Bob Armstrong's appearance brought the studio audience to their feet, man. And the match between those two kept them there, the whole match. And this match probably went past 10 minutes for sure, pretty long for a TV match. And it was back and forth until Bob Armstrong finally put a sleeper hold on Bass. When that happened, the Mongolian Stomper charged out of the dressing room. Big C was at ringside, but Stomper had been nowhere in sight. But he charged out of the dressing room, and he had that new bull rope with him, one that had the big bell on it. And so Joe Leduc in the other dressing room, I'm sure he was watching this match on the camera back there, on the set back there, the monitors, and he charged out of the dressing room. He had the other bull rope. So Big C saw Leduc coming, and he tried to jump. He tried to get in front of the Stomper, who was already about halfway into the ring. And the referee saw Stomper. He immediately called for a disqualification. And the Big C grabbed him from behind the Stomper, trying to keep him out of the ring at this point because he saw Leduc coming with the other bull rope. And the bell started ringing. The match was stopped, but the referee met Joe Leduc at the apron of the ring, stopped him from getting in the ring. Studio crowd was as wild as the wrestlers were, man. This double bull rope match was as far as we could go, basically. You can't get any more violent a match or any wilder a match, hardly, than this one. And so after this tremendous run to sellouts we had, this is exactly what was needed to end this feud. You got to end it with something big, and wow, you can't get any wilder or more violent than this one. And then when you get to this point and you got a territory that's on fire, you got to kind of start all over again. You got to put new combinations of opponents together, or otherwise you get to this point, one of the wrestlers, or worse still, maybe somebody in the crowd in one of these buildings might get injured in a riot or in a wild melee that we were having pretty much all the time. But when you get these double bull ropes and this type of thing, it's time to get serious about what's happening.
Yeah, I kind of feel what you're saying right there. Each week, it seems like these matches seem to get more and more intense, and the continued sellout crowds was not worth the possibility of somebody getting seriously hurt. So this was another great TV show. But what happened in the three main arenas the following week?
Well, Roy Welch got another win, this time over the Avenger. Charlie Cook and Randy Rose wrestled to a really, really exciting, good 20-minute time limit draw match. Very, very good match. Sweet Brown Sugar finally managed to get a win. And this was his third try in one of those three-man matches. So he was going to be getting his first championship match with the champion, Jerry Stubs, the next week. Jerry Stubs was again victorious, defended his United States Junior Heavyweight title against Ricky Gibson, and another controversial win with the hidden object in his wrestling boot. And in the Southeastern Tag Championship match, where the losing team had to split up forever, Rob and I managed to defeat the Big C and big old Plowboy Frazier. We actually beat the 6'10", 430-pound Plowboy with a little bit of smart teamwork. We talked about how we're going to let's beat Plowboy. We had already talked about it. So Rob slipped in behind him on his hands and knees And I drop kicked him in the head. He fell backwards over Rob. I dived over Rob and covered him for the win. So my boy's first loss.
Wow.
And wow, he got upset. Did he go crazy? And he went after Rob, and I don't know why he picked Rob, but he did. And that was kind of the beginning of a situation between Rob and him that was going to lead to other matches down the road. It was just the start of a little feud between Rob and, of all people, Plowboy Frazier. So now it was time for the double bull rope main event, and this match was absolutely crazy. I'd never seen anything like it. All four men were bleeding within the first 5 minutes of the match, and there was no way that fans could keep up with everything that was happening in it. And so it was just crazy. So much action and two bull ropes and the four guys. And Bob started dragging Stomper at one point around the ring. He had him down, and he was touching turnbuckles, and he was about to get. I guess they got to the fifth turnbuckle or whatever it was, and Bass was able to stop him. And by that happening, he had to start all over again. Stomper got up and got on top of Bob, and the match the match began over again. And then and Joe got it, same type of deal, dragging Bass about around 5 or 6 turnbuckles, and Stomper returned the favor to Bass, and he got Leduc. And so finally, after about 30 minutes of this violent match, Big C couldn't help but get involved. I mean, he had to do something. And when he did, I went down and I got involved. And when I went down and got involved, here came Plowboy and Randy Rose. Then Robert and Tony Charles followed them. Finally, all four of the wrestlers in the match they had the bull ropes taken off of, and the Stomper and Bass and Big C, and all the heels left the ring. So the match was declared a no contest. But I don't think anybody in the crowd was upset by that decision. It was one of the greatest matches I had ever seen. Joe and Bob left the ring bigger stars, I think, than they had ever been.
Wow, what a match that had to be. So how about the attendances for those 3 events in the 3 major cities in southeastern Gulf Coast?
Well, all 3 of them sold out again, with more turned away than ever. I mean, we turned away, this is, I think, the 3rd week in a row, and more of them came to see the double bull rope than any of them. Montgomery filled this building at 5,200. Dothan had 5,500 in the farm center.
Wow.
A hot Friday night. So you can imagine what that was like. Mobile in the main arena. We were in the main arena. Luckily, we sold out the main arena, 10,000 fans, and turned people away there, too. The territory was so hot that Pensacola that week drew 5,100. Panama City sold out at 4,000. And we had a spot show in Monroeville, Alabama, that sold out with over 3,000 fans in a spot show. I mean, the territory was absolutely on fire. In fact, it was the biggest week in southeastern history, Knoxville or Gulf Coast, until that time. We drew 33,000 fans in 6 nights.
Wow. In 6 nights. That is incredible. All right, what a week. Obviously, Southeastern had become once again the best small territory in the world, but not in Tennessee this time. This time, it was Southeastern on the Gulf Coast. And I'm telling you, this has been a fantastic Studcast thus far, and I'm happy to say we've reached a point, and I'm just figuring out, checking my notes, we are going to have time for a very interesting learning tree question I mentioned earlier in the show. So let's jump into that. I have so many more questions about what you were just talking about and the attendances. That's amazing. All right, but this question comes from Ken Bobbitt. He asked, how about doing something on life in the fast lane? How much travel time in hotels, gyms, airplanes, and how much at home back in those days? And how do you, and my question was, how do you separate all of that?
Oh, man, that's a great question. I think Mr. Bobbitt, he must have been making a mistake. You're making a comment about one of my recent. This is pretty crazy question here. I think it comes from I did recently one of these when wrestling was wrestling posts on my social media site.
Yeah.
About a wrestling match with Japan's Strong Kobayashi in the WWF in Philadelphia in 1974. And I think this is where he might have had the idea, because I was doing and in 1973 and 1974, I had become somewhat a star, but I was paying the price for it by doing lots of traveling, man. I spent the first 3 months in Australia, 1973, and that was followed by 47 trips in 1973 and 74 to St. Louis. And I was wrestling some shots in Georgia. Plus, this was going to be my second trip after wrestling Kobayashi to wrestle in the WWF. So I had been pushing it, man, big time. And I guess, Mr. Bobbitt, I was spending a lot of time, and I was definitely spending a lot of time, hotels, the gyms, wrestling arenas, on airplanes, and very little time at home back in those days, that's for darn sure. And when I look back on those days, it had a lot to do with my decision. Early on, I focused on winning the world title. That's all I wanted to do as a young wrestler is I wanted to become the world champion. And I wanted to live that lifestyle rather than consider being at home more with my two sons and my wife as much as possible. So in the fall of 1974, just months after wrestling for Vince McMahon Sr. in Philadelphia, I took my family on my first vacation in 4 years. Since I had become a wrestler, it was the very first vacation I took with them. And my trip was in to see the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee, where I live today. So I took my family. I got away from things a little bit. We came to Knoxville, spent some time in the Smokies. And while there, I was relaxing in the hotel room, and I accidentally discovered the wrestling show for Knoxville. And after all those years on the road, and I finally decided, to settle down, to forget trying to be the world champion. I ended up buying the company that I saw the TV show on, and I became an owner, and I became a promoter of the sport, and I settled down, and I began to enjoy my family. We moved to Knoxville, and I was living in God's country. That's what I call this place. This part of the country, to me, is God's country. It was the best decision I ever made. And I really appreciate your question, Mr. Bobbitt. And I may not have answered your exact question, but the mere fact that you asked this question, it made me think back on that decision I made 50 years ago. That's what's really almost exactly 50 years ago we're talking about. And that decision, it was one that changed my life forever.
Wow. I love the way you just laid back and answered that question. So every time I think these Studcasts can't get any better, it's like you end them with something like that. That is so cool. You turn that simple question into something special like these Studcasts are. So I tell you, we have covered so much today, and what a great way to end it. So hey, as your shotgun rider, I got to know, where are we going to be riding in the next Studcast, Ron?
Well, we're going to return to Tennessee, obviously, for the next card with another one of the hidden history lessons from it about the do's and the don'ts of running a wrestling company. And that same subject is going to kind of involve the Southeastern Gulf Coast territory next Studcast, because we're at a turning point there in a way. So we had experienced some fantastic weeks at this point, but now we needed to give some special attention to how we're going to follow these sellouts, and we got to start all over again in a way, and how we're going to build back to more sellouts in the future. We're talking about how all that happens, and like my father used to say, he said, "Don't drop the ball now and fumble away your momentum." Right, so we had great momentum, and so we're going to have to get that momentum back. So there's going to be a lot of discussion in the next one about bookers and why they were so important to the wrestling business. We'll be ending the month of July 1980 in the next one. We'll be entering the first week in August of that same year, and we'll be having a totally different card next time. It won't be a double bull rope. It won't be hardly anything on it like the cards had been. So so we're going to be back in the Gulf Coast. We'll be talking about the TV that promotes the card for next week, results of the card, the attendances. We're going to be covering all of that, and hopefully we may have another learning tree question as well.
That is so awesome. All right, folks, you know the deal. On Facebook, you find Ron at Ron Fuller, the Tennessee Stud. Like and follow him there. Automatically become friends with a living legend. Twitter or X, very similar. He's at Ron Fuller Welch. Follow him there also. Check out the fantastic website, tnstud.com, tnstud.com. This Studcast is going to be there. Every Studcast ever done. His Stud Store is where you can get 43 Super Studcast, 4 different 8x10 photos, the best-selling novel Brutus, personally autographed to you, all at tnstud.com, and subscribe to Ron's YouTube channel, Southeastern Rewind. When you go to YouTube, put in Southeastern, it starts coming up immediately. Southeastern Rewind. You find hundreds of hours of classic old school wrestling entertainment. You can sit there for hours. 435 total videos. The last 138 Studcast. Ask the Stud shows and short rides with the Stud. Go back 1 year or more. Discover fantastic Stud stories with worldwide stars. Studcast archive stories. Tell Me More fan question shows. Superstars of the past shows. And so much more. That's YouTube, Southeastern Rewind. It's the best deal in wrestling. All right. Any final comments today, Ron?
Yeah, I'd like to thank, the fans that came to see Rob and I recently over there in Charlotte, North Carolina. And thanks, obviously, to those that joined us today for this Studcast. And hope you enjoyed it. And please take care of yourself and others. And may God bless us all.
For Ron Fuller in the Great Smoky Mountains, I'm David Summers saying thank you for listening. Find me at davidsummersproductions@gmail.com. This Studcast is a David Summers production for Tennessee Stud, LLC.
Thanks for joining us today for this historic Studcast. The true story continues next week. So full Nelson your friends and point them in our direction for another ride with the Tennessee Stud.
1, 2, 3.
This is David Summers saying so long from the Great Smoky Mountains.